Hello, and welcome to Ideas with Diana on this April 19th, 2023. Um, the title of this show is The Right to Free Speech and Freedom from Harassment and Violence. The reason why I mention these are part of the biggest reason for the topic of this show is what happened at a recent university when a speaker came to speak regarding um, an issue in sports that has been evidence to indicate her point of view and a point of view based upon actual experience. Um, the speaker was Larry Gaines, and she spoke. After she spoke, basically, that there's some people that disagreed with her views. Some people just took the viewpoint that, well, okay, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll defend you like to say it. But other people basically came and, translate, putting a phone in her face, blocking her way. I even heard on some TV shows about her being hit and she having to stay in a safe room for 3 hours while they try and also a mob requesting that someone pay a ransom. Really? Oh my God. What has this society come to? The reason why I mentioned this is because I went to a university that was founded in 1968. For this is I'm not meaning to talk down to some people who are younger of the younger generation, but um, in 1968, I was 6 years old, but when I went to this university in the late 70s, I was 16. But when the university was founded, University of Wisconsin Parkside, it was founded as a fusion of the university system that existed of UW Kenosha and UW Racine, because basically people wanted to have a full 4 year college rather than 2 year extension school. They also wanted to form a college on a different basis. The different basis is this. Um, what happens, it goes back to how my parents remember Madison, and this is pre 1964 versus post 1964. My parents graduated from Madison in 1952. My dad had graduated with an advanced degree in chemical engineering, which at that time was considered a master's, but today is considered a PhD in chemical engineering. My mother graduated with a business degree from Madison Business College, but also took courses at UW Madison. Both of them were business people. My mother's company was a prominent roll contractor in Wisconsin. My dad was a prominent research and development executive. In addition to being an engineer, he also was a military advisor and military consultant for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and worked for Major General, who's retired from the U.S. Army Air Corps. Well, getting back to Parkside, 1960, when Parkside was formed, Madison, like many other colleges at that time, had been faced with stress of the Vietnam Gulf of Tonkin resolution. I'll say the Vietnam Gulf of Tonkin resolution. The reason I say this is because I know of many friends from the Vietnam generation who served either in Vietnam or served in NATO during that time. As Parkside is formed, there's a group of professors who came to form Parkside from Madison, but they had a different thing. They wanted the UW system to get back to what the original basis was prior to 1964, not the hyper politicalism and the hyper um, uh, sort of my way or the highway or this or that. And they wanted to get back to an academic. So when Parkside was formed, we had many veterans that returned from Vietnam during the 70s, and the thing is, at Parkside, the attitude was that we were open. It was as to be academic and research, so we had free discussions. I put some clips on there. One of them is from Back to School about how you could actually discuss things and not have to worry about someone hitting or trying to assault you. But someone might respond back to you and say, well, might challenge you to defend it, like the way Rodney Dangerfield had to defend his position. But at that time at Parkside, when many veterans came back, many of the students took a greater understanding to understand what they had gone through when they were in Vietnam, and realizing that some of the veterans that were in Vietnam, many of them did not have the right to question an unreasonable order. They didn't have the rank, they didn't have the family resources, they didn't have the legal protection to do so. So when they came back, it was unfair to call them the names that they were called, because they didn't have any choice not to resist the draft. They didn't have any choice not to go. They didn't have any choice not to follow those orders. Especially, and this was even mentioned many years earlier in the second Nuremberg trial, which is what Edward Snowden cited as an example in his defense. Now, when I watch the clips that I put on the playlist regarding this incident that happened at a San Francisco university, I'm shocked. Well, I really shouldn't be shocked based on today's society, but I am. Because when I went to school, we could discuss anything, and not have to worry about someone going to the cell phone, or someone even trying to punch us out, or we have to lock ourselves in a safe room. Good heavens, we're not a barbaric society. We're supposed to be a civilized society and an intelligent society, especially on the university. It's one thing if you disagree with someone. That's part of the founding of the United States. I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend your right to say it. So and defending one's right to say it means that the speaker doesn't have to worry about being attacked, harmed, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and others. Yet, basically, from the descriptions I heard, that phrase of Voltaire, I don't know how that was forgotten, but to me it seems like it was forgotten like that, though. The thing is, we should be able to discuss things, and even like regarding basically athletic participation. The thing is, the person was speaking from the actual experience. She raced against a competitor, and she felt some concerns, and she has a right to express their concerns, even in any church that someone will go to, even in the First Congregational Church, or one Lutheran church that I attend. The first thing before any service, are there any concerns or basically actions that need to be addressed? And the minister will ask. And many people in the church feel comfortable to come up and speak their concerns. Some people may sort of go, but what happens is they understand that basically, although they may not agree, they'll defend the right of the person to express their concerns. In addition, even in church, basically, not everyone has to agree on everything someone says. There are people that may agree with some things with some people, or someone to say, but they're not gonna fight them. They're not gonna beat them up. They're not gonna try to do damage or try to scare someone that they go into safe room, like what happened at the San Francisco college. And this reminds me about what my concern is about college. My concern about college is I took continuing education classes a few years ago, and in communications and advanced computer science. Well, I won't say which section, but I'll say which section. I took a class in communications, and there's a younger professor who was teaching, and the professor sort of made a comment, says, well, this system is so bad you have to blank over. And I'll leave it up to you to decide what word he put in. And what happened was some of the students just sort of agreed and supported his gesture of how he did it. a few students saw me roll my eyes, and one person who was very concerned about me being basically who I am. She said, "Well, at least one thing, you and your family did go to church, and you still go to church because you look." And we had a conversation after class, and she said, I didn't realize, but you share a lot of the values that I share, but I don't want to pry as to why you chose the path in your life, but I can sort of see that basically you chose the path, because there's something that basically that is truly that made you change the path. But we do share values, and you're right. The professor should have acted in a more professional manner. And the other point in the class was at one point when I was talking, and others were talking. There's a case of sort of suburbanite versus what I call low labor hostility that existed, because the professor was a former electrician who became a professor, and he was mad that basically that some of us spoke the way we normally speak, and he felt that we were using our vocabulary against him. We weren't using our vocabulary against him. We're just speaking the way that we've always have spoken. Although we went to suburban schools and he went to labor schools in Chicago, and I went to suburban schools in Wauwatosa and in Kenosha. Um, but the point is, it was completely different compared to when I went to school, because when I went to Parkside, just to give an example how we address a professor. My professors always insisted we address them by name. So it's like Beecham, Gene, Beecham, Gene, David, Alma, Anna Marie, and others. It wasn't like, well, Dr. Jill or Dr. John, or like in the news, it's like Dr. Joe Biden. Many of our professors would have cringed because they would have considered that pretentious, and that's what they considered why Madison became too radical, why Parkside had to be a point of zero that it coexisted with nature, so to sort of save the University of Wisconsin system from itself back then. And even now, but now basically that has changed, because even on campus now, when I go to visit friends who are professors, I actually was interviewed to be a professor at Parkside in the early 2000s. And the reason I didn't pursue it was I still wanted to stay in the private sector, and I felt I could do more helping in business than I could in at the university. But when I see my friends there, we used to have an open door policy. Students could come in the office and talk and say, well, what about this? So, what about this? What about that? Or even in the lunchroom, it was common for us to have lunch with our professors, or even when Guskin, who was the chancellor when I was at UW Park, say he walked down the hall, he'd come down and talk with me and say, well, how's your classes going? Good, good. Well, do you ever? And then we talk as we walk down Main Place and walk down parts of the university, but nowadays when I go see my friends who teach out there, I notice on the doors um, appointments required for students to see the professors, and I just wonder if that's just because of this wokeness and this activism, and even trans activism that's gone out of control. I do agree with the San Francisco thing. There's concern that there was out of control, and even like a half day of seminars to say, well, okay, we'll do a half day of seminars to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's going to take more than a half day of seminars to do it, because the thing is, when people speak, you have a few options when someone's speaking. If someone is saying something that's disagreeable to you, you have a few options. You can either walk away, you can listen and not respond violently, or if the person invites you to say a response, you can say a response that is educated, academic, and not emotionally threatening or physically threatening. Or the other thing, what you could do in the future is you could avoid that person. But the thing is, when we think about this, I think about the old fast food model, McDonald's. When my parents were alive, we used to go out to McDonald's for breakfast, and even Big Boy, and we go out and we have friends, and some friends were in the labor union, some were not, others, and we shared a wide variety of opinions. I mean, I read the Chicago Tribune, and I was always accused, you're reading the Colonel's paper, you're reading the conservative paper. And also I read the Milwaukee Journal, which was supposed to be the liberal paper, and the Wall Street Journal. Yet, well, an interesting practice we had back then at McDonald's was that each of us would bring different papers in from around the community. When we got done, we leave the papers there for other people to read. And also, while we're there, some people say, well, here, can I read the sports section of your Tribune? Sure, go ahead. And then I said, well, can I read your business section of your journal? Sure. We'd swap papers and we read it. And what happens, sometimes we talk and say, well, I really don't agree with this. And I said, well, yeah, I can see your point. I think there's some, and they said, well, I agree with this point. And the thing is, we didn't get in a fight. We didn't threaten anyone. No one had to run to a safe room. No one had to be escorted by the police. No ransoms were demanded for the safe exit of a person from a building. So this really shows why in our society we really need to cut down on this what I call this cell phone activism, and going in your face and saying, I'm gonna put you on social media, I'm gonna yell trans rights and such to prove that I actually, the person who when people come up and violate someone's space, and in my opinion, that's not really supporting trans rights, because basically you don't support a person's rights by violating a personal space, or making a person feel nervous, or basically that they have to go in a safe room. I do hope that basically what did happen encourages universities all across the country, and even us outside the university system, to really discuss and work more towards going back to an older system where we could discuss things. Sometimes we'd argue. It's one thing to argue and basically argue non-violently. But it's another thing to argue where someone's going to feel like they're going to be hurt emotionally, psychologically, or something else. Um, this activism where people have to hide out in a safe room, there's a demand for ransom because a group of people don't like what a person said, especially on a university campus, it has to stop. It has to stop. With me, I would love to go back to my home university and take continuing education courses. And I would love to actually go back and get back on the radio station again, or even the podcast, if I felt that basically certain things were changed in the university. I and other alumni would be glad to come back. But part of the reason we stay away is because when I see the podcasting, I see um, the podcasting is only used to support certain agendas for programs. That's not how our communications and media is supposed to be. It's just supposed to be an open format for everybody. Because when I originally started WIPZ, a friend of mine, basically who's much younger, that goes to Parkside, and basically we sort of were like bus friends, because we take the same bus every day to go do our errands in Kenosha. And she said, I'm doing this program on WIPC. You should really come. It's a great station. You could do. I said, so what happens? I went up there and I said, well, who did I talk to? I said, I can't. So well, I just recommend it. It says, and they said, okay, well, then they said, sure. Well, and I sort of started, and then they said, well, before you go any further, you need to take the FCC test. So I took the FCC test, and the FCC test is about certain common sense things, like you can't say the 7 famous swear words that were said in a comedy routine years ago. Also, you can't use the radio station to incite a mob to violence and other stuff. And also, you can't use the radio station to push a political agenda or any type of an agenda. So what happened was basically I started Ideas with Diana. It was originally one show by myself. then a few moments, a few weeks, about a few months later, a friend of mine said, "Well, oh, this is a great show. Could I come on? I have some ideas I'd like to share about, what about sharing, after college, alumnus." So we talk about employment contracts, sweetheart contracts. I talk about finances. Ron mentioned about history. But finally, a third friend said, "Well, oh, that's great. Can I come in? Because I like to could you?" So we had Nikita, and for a while we had a good show where we would discuss ideas. And it's interesting on the show though. Many people didn't realize it, but all of us are Republicans. But when the students listen, they say, "God, those guys had a great show. They really talked with us about stuff." And we even encourage the students to question the professors, to ask questions out. And this is where we sort of ran into a little bit of the wokeness wave, or the wokeness um, compactor, because we were not, we don't believe, all three of us had lived through the Vietnam era. I and Nikita basically were 6 and about 9 years old in '68. Ron, he was actually drafted in '65. And so we all knew about basically being too loyal to a certain political agenda, or to a certain um, political cult, or belief cult, which the way when I saw this thing at what happened with this one college student who spoke, it almost reminded me like she is accosted by a cult. We lived through that. We knew that basically the way we survived the aftermath of Vietnam and Watergate was that as a country, we kept one important thing: the ability to talk, and the ability to talk, even though some we may not agree with someone, let them speak, and also not to do as other bad countries do as well. After the speech, people are attacked, they're accosted, they're harassed, they're the justice system is weaponized to trump up charges to try to put them in jail or something. Excuse the word Trump, I that's an old expression, but it does remind me a little bit too what former President Trump is going through as well. The way we survived the issues of Vietnam and Watergate was that we still kept to our core fundamentals. But today, when I see how some of the younger generations acting, the core fundamentals have eroded. It's going to be up to those in the younger generation who still follow the core fundamentals, that step up in leadership to make sure that we keep our core fundamentals. Because if we don't keep our core fundamentals of I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend you like to say it. And also, I'll make sure that you are not accosted, you are not threatened, you are not beaten up. Police don't have to put you in a safe room for 3 hours. Someone can't demand a ransom for your safe exit from a building. Oh my God. If I had a child at that type of university, or I would come and say, let's find another university to go to. And that goes back to one project that I've been doing over the last 2 years, is what I call the Knowledge Project. I've been collecting different types of textbooks in my field of pre-med, computer science, management, business, and I've been collecting hardcover and hard copy. Let me just pull something out here to show you. Let's see. For example, this is one on physical chemistry. And the reason why I've been doing this is because I believe it is important to keep the paper knowledge, because I'm concerned about with ebooks and how easy things can be manipulated on internet and in electronic media, that people will lose basic ideas. Also, the reason why I do projects like this, breadboarding, of course I could use a simulator to do this. But the reason why I do this is because it's important to actually know how to make something. It's not all programming. You have to know how to make something. You have to know how do you start to build something? How do you put the chips in on a breadboard? How do you do this? And even how do you do this? Diagram. This is a special processor. I'm planning on making 256-bit ALU. Um, no, now the problem is what I'm concerned about is on campuses that have gone too woke, or even campuses that have lost the compass as far as transgender rights, which I think this thing in San Francisco demonstrates the compass has been lost. Um, we need to get a new compass when that's functioning properly. Um, we really need to get the campuses and even society back together, because now what I remember basically when I think about transgenderism and stuff, when I was listening to Megan Kelly's show, she had some guests on there, one that made a movie. Let's see, was it Alien Nation? I think it's on the link. You'll see it. But it's talking about transgender. They talked about what it's like to be transgender in 2000, early 2000s. Yes, early 2000s is very hard to come out as transgender. Even in Milwaukee, when I worked at the research park, it was still considered a psychological disease, even up until 1999 in Milwaukee. It was still basically, um, so even if you wanted to come out there, only certain places in the country you could live, you could work. But the thing is, when people did come out, um, the people that did really came out were those that had gender dysphoria, as I do, and that. And the reason why I'm specifying the difference, though, because there is a basis that on this the discussions I have on the playlist, and especially from insight from Megan Kelly's show, is that there's some people that I didn't think of it this way until I listened to the show today, but there's some people who are coming out as transgender because they want to get some sort of sexual thrill or something else by dressing as the opposite gender, or something else, or competing as the opposite gender. Now that actually isn't transgender. That used to be called that was referred to the class of cross dressers, psychoeroticism, not transgender, because transgender means you either have gender dysphoria or you have a psychological condition. Um, and the gender. But the thing is, I agree with people who with the discussion that if someone is transitioning because they have psychoeroticism, they get the thrill of a sexual arousal by putting on women's clothes, or they get the sexual arousal of competing as a woman. That's not being a woman. That's being a man acting as a woman, because they still want to have that privilege. They still want to have the identity. Um, and another way to consider is this: years ago, when my fiance was alive, she was telling me about one time she was traveling, and what happened was basically she was with a friend, and they went to see a show, and there was a drag show, and what happened was basically at one point in the show she saw one of the performers out of costume and said, "Oh, I really loved your show." Guess what the performer did? Oh, he was very offended. Is like, oh, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. No, 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 that wasn't me. Um, and actually very angry. And it showed a thing that people who claim to transition because of they're being cross dressers or psychoeroticism, they get very upset when confronted about whether they actually did dress or not, because they don't want to give up the male privilege. They don't want to give up the male aspect. And that's a case where, as one book that's mentioned in Megyn Kelly's show by the panelists, The Transsexual Empire, which I read, is the book was published in 1973. I actually read it many years, a few years after it was published, about 1977, because Parkside has a big library on topics of many books, and that was in the RC section, as Parkside uses the Library of Congress system, to try to understand things. Also, I read Dr. Benjamin's book about interviews with different people who are transgendered, as well as others at that time, to try to understand what does it actually mean to be, if you have gender dysphoria or basically the other form of transgenderism. The thing is that the activism, or I should say the so-called activism that happened in San Francisco, I don't support that. I don't support attacking anybody. I don't support having anyone made fearful that they have to go in a safe room. To the group that did that type of thing, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. Like the Beatles said in one song, if you want to do violence, you can count me out. And to that San Francisco group that did violence, you can count me out. This has been Ideas with Diana, and you can reach me on Twitter at Diana1A. Also, I set an account at Truth Social at Diana1A, as well as Telegram. And I'll post the links on Truth Social and Telegram shortly, but the other links on Twitter and Facebook will be immediately a few minutes after this presentation. Again, thank you for watching, and please, I do not support the San Francisco group who did this violence. I am out, I am out, I am out. Like the Beatles said, if you're going to do violence, I am out. This has been Ideas with Diana, and I'd like to thank you for watching and your continued support.